Hi, this is Lauren from Verivest, and today we are chatting with Sam Hales from Saratoga Group. Welcome. We're really excited to chat with you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lauren.
Yeah, of course. So let's just get started. I'd love to kind of hear your origin story and hear kind of how you are where you are today.
Yeah, you bet. So I started in real estate back in 2009, kind of right after the housing crash, and started buying single-family homes. Started doing that with kind of my own capital, friends and family, and then shortly after that raised a fund and started doing single-family homes actually around the San Francisco Bay Area to Sacramento. In fact, that's the genesis of the Saratoga Group, is based on kind of what we were doing. There were a lot of people that we saw that were, basically out of the housing market because maybe they got foreclosed on or had to short sell their home and they couldn't get back into home ownership. And so we started buying these homes, and we were really focused on affordable housing and then providing basically a path to home ownership for these folks. And anyway, there's a whole story there about the Battle of Saratoga in the Revolutionary War and how that kind of ties in.
Yeah. Oh, great. I'm sure you've seen the Bay Area and San Francisco change dramatically as well, too, since 2009.
It's amazing to think back. Like if we'd had the foresight and thought, okay, so you can buy these homes in Alameda or Oakland,
right,
and they were still generating as much rent, as they were 6 months ago before it crashed.
Right.
But the prices had just caved, and yeah, I mean, there was certainly a lot of money to be made there, and we bought some, probably not enough, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you tell me kind of how you source deal flow and what your acquisition strategy is?
Yeah, you bet. So we kind of have a couple ways that we're doing that. One of the things is I actually have a technology background, and so we have software capabilities at Saratoga Group. We've developed, like, for example, one of the things we've developed is kind of like a web crawler that goes out and helps us identify there's kind of different metrics, properties that we're doing mobile home communities, but mobile home community owners that may be ready to sell. So that's kind of one piece that brings some deal flow. Really, most of the deal flow happens through relationships, and that's I would say something that I learned that maybe I didn't do so well early in my career that we do a lot better. For example, in the manufactured housing space, what's interesting is that unlike, it's a pretty fragmented space. So there's a few brokers that are kind of nationally known. And if you're a seller and you go to them, like, they know all the buyers.
Right.
And so you can pretty much guarantee, like, if you see a package coming from that broker, you and 50 other firms are all looking at it. Yeah. And so, it's gonna sell at market, and the market's hard right now. Right. So instead, what we typically do is, in a lot of these areas, we're in Greenville, North Carolina, for example, and we've established relationships there with local people, including local brokers. They know all the people, they know all the sellers. They don't really know buyers, and so once we were able to kind of foster that kind of relationship, they're happy that they have a buyer, and of course we're happy that they're able to find sellers for us. And so that's been really productive for us, is kind of fostering and finding those kind of relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what would you say are the key markets that you operate in, and why do you choose kind of those specific markets?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, if we could, we'd love to buy in Austin, Texas, and Nashville, Tennessee, right? I mean, all those are great markets. In the manufactured housing space, there's just not deals available there, to be totally candid. So we're in tertiary markets. We're pretty focused on the Southeast. So we're in Greenville, North Carolina. We're in Greenville, South Carolina. We're in Huntsville, Alabama. We're in Memphis, Tennessee. So instead of Nashville, right, we're in Memphis, and that's a perfect market for affordable housing, which is our space. But it's very difficult to kind of buy in those primary for sure, and even the top secondary markets are really tough to find manufactured housing in. But anyway, generally we like the Southeast. To give you an example there, so we compared Greenville, South Carolina to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and these were two MSAs that were very similar in a lot of ways. Like they had the same median income, same median home price, median rent. Like a lot of the metrics looked the same, but the mobile home park lot rent was half as much in Greenville, South Carolina versus Grand Rapids, Michigan. And you kind of like, why? Is there a good reason for that? And the reason is there's not really a good reason other than more institutional buyers have kind of bought in the upper Midwest and in the West and even in the Northeast. In the Southeast, there's a lot less of that.
Right.
And so that's been one of the reasons. But, we look at things like net migration and all those kind of standard things. And that's another reason we really like the Southeast.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like too, especially after this last year, so many people are really relocating to the Southeast as well too. So I'm sure you've seen that on your end.
It's an awesome tailwind. I mean, we're a long-term holder, and we explain this to our investors. It's like, we'll usually set up a 7 to 10 year fund, which is pretty long anyway. And we also tell our investors, you'll get your capital back, at some point, is it 7 years, is it 10 years, could be less, but we don't plan to sell these assets. And so our time horizon is like, we want to be, 15 years from now, it makes a big difference if that MSA grew by 2% or shrunk by 2%. Like that's a huge, right, over time, that's a huge difference. So yeah, the migration into the Southeast, because it's business friendly and the climate and like I said, remote work and all the rest, it's kind of amazing what's happening there.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say kind of is your investment philosophy? How do you determine whether a deal is worth doing or not?
So we really have kind of three levers that we're looking at that we want to, I guess you'd say, pull these levers, and usually it has to meet at least two of these three. So one of them is the ability to raise rents. Another one is that there needs to be a chance to improve operational efficiency, and finally there needs to be a path to infill with new homes, basically to add occupancy. So just to kind of expand on that a little bit, so in the manufactured housing space, like our average community that we purchase is only 55% occupied, right? So if we were talking about multifamily right now, and I gave you that number, right, we'd be like, what's wrong? Like, where is this thing located? Does it need to be like just bulldozed? Like, why does nobody live there? Yeah. In manufactured housing, it's different, and you see it a lot. What happens is a lot of these mom and pop owners, it's expensive to bring in new homes, and if they don't have a relationship with a bank that's going to finance that, they're kind of looking at it like, okay, I'm generating $100,000 a year in net income, and I can either keep taking that money every year, or I can buy two houses. They're like, yeah, I'll just kind of keep taking that money every year, and then if somebody comes, stumbles along and wants to move a home in, I'll take it. But so we, most of the, like I said, on average, 55% occupied. So there's a lot of room typically to kind of move the needle with occupancy. Yeah. And the interesting thing there is most of the costs, and this isn't any different than any other real estate, but most of the costs are fixed. So as we add those new homes, then that's almost all going to the bottom line. So those other two levers that we want to be able to pull. One of them is raising rents, and this is what I talked about. I mean, we don't want to be egregious about it. This is affordable housing, but we also want to look at areas where we think there's going to be rent growth because of migration and things like that, and where we can buy something kind of below market. And then that final one is operational efficiency. I'll give you an example. So something that you see a lot in a mobile home community is that they'll have like a main water line coming into the community, and that's what, as an owner, that's what you get charged for is whatever that water bill is coming in. But often these mom and pop owners, they haven't, it's obviously distributed from there, but they haven't metered it for the individual homeowners. And so what happens is if there's a leak, or if, who knows what's going on inside the person's home and the toilet's running, if they're not paying for that water, let's face it, they don't really care, right? So what we see is we see these communities where it's like, man, these huge water bills, and there's probably leaks different places, but because nobody's really paying attention, so we'll go in and we'll sub-meter, and we have a company we use that does like an electronic meter that we get readings remotely, and it just kind of feeds right into our property management system. So anyway, that's just one example of kind of an operational efficiency that we'll add.
Right. Yeah, absolutely makes sense. What would you say kind of, how do you determine generating value once you've made an investment? Kind of what's your risk mitigation strategy?
Yeah, I'm going to use an example or an analogy maybe. So, well, I guess most of us have been through the experience of let's call it middle school, maybe it was high school, taking the bus to school. I know I had that experience. And the bus for a middle school student can be a very intimidating environment.
Right.
And so we have something we call the bus test, which is you think about, maybe it's the elementary school kid or the middle school kid, as they're getting on the bus or they're getting off the bus in front of your community, if they're ashamed of, basically where they live, right, of the community, then we haven't passed the bus test, right? So we want, and to be totally candid, a lot of these communities that we buy, when we buy them, they wouldn't pass the bus test. It'd be a place that, they're going to be embarrassed to live there, to be quite frank. And so that's our goal. And how do we do that? We repave the roads. We'll we'll bring in a really nice playground system, industrial playground system like you'd see at a community park or that sort of thing. We install solar street lights. We remove the old home, if they're in really bad shape, we'll kind of tear those out. We'll bring new homes in. Add new signage, just make it a friendly, warm, and inviting place to live. Yeah. So as we do that, what we found so far, if we pass the bus test, like the rest of it kind of takes care of itself, right? And so obviously we're very focused on the bottom line, which is preserving capital and creating a healthy return on capital. But it comes down to kind of human psychology. If it's a place where somebody drives up and it looks inviting and it looks safe and it looks clean, then we're going to have no problem filling that new home that we just moved in or whatever. And that's what we find. There's so, and we know this, right? There's so much demand for affordable housing, and there's such a need there. Mobile home communities are kind of an unsubsidized solution to that. And so anyway, that's kind of how we go about it.
Yeah, I love that take. It's really great to hear how much you put thought and effort into the community and the people that are living there, and it's a really great analogy. I love that.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, lastly, I'd love to hear just kind of who your key players are that allow you to execute your acquisition and kind of asset management strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've learned a little bit of this the hard way is that, I've kind of described, and we're pretty heavy on the capital improvements, right? So like, for example, street paving. We initially, as we went into this business, we went down the road of, okay, so you're in Wichita, Kansas, then you hire somebody from Wichita, and then you might never do business with them again because you've got one park there and you're going to repave it, and then you move on to Louisville, Kentucky, and you do the same thing. And what we found is we had a really hard time getting the quality of product that we wanted, kind of going that way. So asphalt's just one example, and so we have a partner there, and he basically goes around the country. He's not an employee of ours, but he repaves any community that needs to be repaved. He's doing it, and at first you're like, well, that sounds really expensive. I mean, that was my impression, like why we didn't ever think about doing that initially. But what you find is, well, everybody in that market's going to the same place to get the asphalt. He doesn't have to bring all his equipment there. There's ways that right, so and even the crews and the people. So it's him, but he's using local people, local equipment and all that sort of stuff. And so we're getting basically the same price we would from somebody else. But now we have somebody that's totally invested in us. And he knows, like, he's not going to do a job just to get it done. He knows that, hey, if he does this and he does it well, we've got a lot more business coming down the pipeline. And so we've done things like that. So we try to, whether it's tree trimming, the solar street lights that we're doing, the asphalt that we're doing, we do those kind of relationships. Another part of our relationship is really we actually brought on a couple partners recently. So we're doing mobile home communities, but we're also doing opportunity zone funds, and we're kind of combining those two. And so we brought on a couple groups that are just real knowledgeable in that space. For example, Joe McAdams is now a board advisor for us. Joe was a president of ELS, which is Sam Zell company, doing mobile home communities, has a ton of experience in the space. And so he's been able to just introduce us to a lot of, if we need financing help, if we need kind of different needs that we've had. And so he's been a key part of the team that we've added recently as well.
Yeah, that's great. I love how diverse kind of the background of your team is. It's really good.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Lauren.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sam. It was a pleasure chatting with you today and learning more about Saratoga. And, we really look forward to working together.
Awesome. I look forward to it as well.
Great. Thank you so much.